Hey, what is up, everybody? This is Stevie Breach coming to you. Last night on the WWE Network, I was able to catch up. I went with another WCW 2000 pay-per-view. I don't know why, but basically, Bash at the Beach 2000, in my mind, is the night that WCW died, in my mind. I still was a fan after Bash at the Beach. I would go on, I would order New Blood Rising, and the shows that went after that. I don't remember if I ordered the last pay-per-view that was a week before they closed WCW or not, if I just waited to get it on a tape through the black market, but you know, WCW to me was always good wrestling. The storylines near the end were kind of dull, but you just sort of got used to ordering the pay-per-views in and out, and I got this one. I remember it. I remember the day. I remember just having this sinking feeling during the show that I was like, this is the dumbest shit that I've ever seen. On this show involves one of the biggest angles that Vince Russo, Hulk Hogan, and the WCW ever did. And basically, it's debated to this day if it was real, if it was fake. I'm going to take this small little minute to plug my buddy. Luke Cara made a video on the Bret the Hitman Hart. If you believe if the screw job in Montreal was a work or not. Go over, check out my buddy Luke Cara. He made a good video. And post your thoughts on what happened on that one. Basically, with that shoot that went down in Montreal, WCW saw that as like one of the big launching grounds of the WWF that helped them take over and win the war. Honestly, that built up a heel, Vince McMahon. It helped move Bret Hart out of the company. It made Shawn Michaels as the champion. It gave them a spot at the top of the card for Stone Cold Steve Austin. A lot of things happened that night in Montreal for the WWF. They went in their right direction, and they got a lot of bad publicity. But a lot of people say that bad publicity is good publicity because at least people are talking about you, and maybe people that were watching WCW at the time, which I think that a lot of people why WCW caught on to win the war was they were a lot of times they always emphasize on people in college throwing these nitro parties and things like that, and I think that maybe they jumped in and they went along with what everybody was doing, and it was the cool thing to do to watch wrestling. And you saw the people that were in WCW were the people that you were watching when you were a kid, like with Roddy Piper, with Hulk Hogan, the Macho Man, so on and so forth. That maybe they didn't know what was going on the other channel, and because of this bad publicity and everybody hyping it up, saying that Vince screwed Bret or Bret screwed Bret or whatever it was, that was the hot thing to do. And WCW, when they brought over Vince Russo's big thing was try to make big angles that'll hit the dirt sheets that that is what's going to get you the people to tune in, because they're basically just sort of like want to see what was going on. In the era of Vince Russo, we saw worked fights in the locker room between, well, the DDP versus Scott Steiner one was real, but we saw DDP and Buff Bagwell have a fight in front of the boys, hoping that the boys would go tell like Dave Meltzer, and then they would be all over the dirt sheets. And then what do you know? They have a match on pay-per-view because people think that these guys actually have real heat on what's going down. We saw stupid stuff like the announcers claiming that Scott Steiner was breaking the script against Goldberg, and that basically he was really shooting on Goldberg, and that nobody knew what was going to go down, and nobody could predict what Scott Steiner was going to do. And they did a whole bunch of stupid shit like this that basically the Hulk Hogan Vince Russo angle, to me, honestly, is one of the easiest things to point out, is that it's a work in the history of wrestling. Vince Russo was in the WWF at the time. He saw how big the Hulk Hogan thing, he saw how big the Bret Hart thing was when it went down, and he thought that maybe he could get Hulk off the roster for a while, promise him a spot, and bring him back somewhere down the road. It ended up being the last time the Hulk Hogan ever worked for WCW, probably because Hulk saw the writing on the wall, and he could make the same amount of money as he did sitting home, and he wouldn't have to go out there and try to help this company that was on its dying days. He had, he made the same amount of money sitting at home as the same amount of money he would do if he was working. Hulk Hogan is very sort of, known for picking the right times to come back when he knows that wrestling's going to be hot, that he can point to it and said, I did that number. And, he never had that chance because WCW at the time was skyrocketing down into the ground. And so, basically, there was no way to work Hulk Hogan with this. Like, why your WCW World Heavyweight Championship match would go on so early in the show and Hulk Hogan wasn't going to know that something was going down? The only thing that there was to main event this show was Goldberg versus Kevin Nash. Why Hogan would, have his creative control card saying where he could go on in the card and, let Goldberg versus Kevin Nash be the main event. This, of course, is when Goldberg is going through his big heel turn. He's going up against Kevin Nash and the big, I don't know if it's really a rematch. It's the start of their feud, I guess you can say, even though they had fought at Starrcade before. Basically, Goldberg was the guy who took out Kevin Nash and made him lose his title at the pay-per-view before. And, of course, the big controversy was that if Goldberg beat Kevin Nash, he got to tear up Scott Hall's WCW contract, and Scott Hall would be fired and never be able to work there again. Of course, Scott hadn't worked in WCW since they sent him home after Super Brawl in February. And he really was, honestly, released shortly after this time in a cost-cutting measure, thinking that, they were never going to be able to use Scott again, so they just cut ties with them, letting him go off and do whatever he needed to do, which ended up him going over to going over to ECW and working a couple spot shows down there in Florida, which I guess you can see those matches on YouTube if you look for him. He even did a job for one of the biggest, fattest guys in the company that couldn't work, just to prove to the boys that he wasn't in it for himself and that he was actually going to go out there and work and try hard. Basically, Hogan's not dumb. During this show, there's a match. Booker T versus Kanyon. And Kanyon beats Booker T by, sort of a run-in by Jeff Jarrett. Jeff Jarrett is involved in an angle with Hulk Hogan. Why Hogan would see Jarrett involved in an angle with Booker T and not wonder why that Jarrett's not involved in a real angle with Hogan going down, and the whole angle that's involved with Hogan being at the pay-per-view as if nobody knows if he's going to show up or not. It's stupid. It doesn't make any sense. Hulk Hogan's not dumb. Why they went along with the story so long. I guess Hogan had money and WCW had money to burn to try to make this look like a real story. They really honestly did sue each other over this situation. Hogan saying that Russo went too far and, did the defamation of character, and basically nothing ever came of it. WCW and some lawyers, WCW wasted some money, some lawyers made some money, and nothing really went down. When you look at this show, honestly, nothing's really spectacular. You just honestly see the day that WCW dies in my eyes. You have Lieutenant Loco and Juventud Guerrero going at it for the Cruiserweight Championship. This is involved in the Filthy Animals and Misfits in action. These guys have been going at it so long. WCW came down and said that, they were all going to be banned from ringside. But somehow, during the middle of the match, the Misfits in action come down through the crowd and jump over the rail, and they're all wearing these fake president masks. And the referees don't kick them out for the one reason of they really think it's the president's down there. I guess they were a little too scared to send major guns down the aisle with the fans, thinking that somebody might touch a Titty Tuesday on them. But basically, she comes right down the ramp. She's not wearing a mask. Nobody kicked her out of there. I wouldn't kick her out of there either. But then we see good old Norman Smiley teaming up with Ralphus of Chris Jericho fame, going against Big Vito for the Hardcore Championship. Nothing really to talk about there. There is a wedding gown match. This was involved around in the Daphne was engaged to David Flair. David Flair being the son of Ric Flair, but he started having an affair with Miss Hancock, a.k.a. Stacy Keibler, which led to a feud between Daphne and Miss Hancock. They had a wedding gown match at the pay-per-view to see who the rights was, who was going to be the one who married David Flair. And in this match, they fought and fought and fought until the one point of Crowbar got involved with David Flair. They were slinging cake around all over the ring, all over the outside. Finally, somebody grabbed a mic and gave it to Stacy Keibler, and she stopped the match and said, "I know what you all want to see." And she took her own wedding gown dress off, losing the match, which would make her lose David Flair. But anyways, on Monday, she got to be with David in the end. It makes no sense. Pay attention to the cake. It's coming back. We had a match between Chronic and the Perfect Event for the World Tag Team Championships. I was honestly always a fan of the Perfect Event. Anything that involved my boys was the Chuck Palumbo, Sean Stasiak, there was Jindrak, there was O'Hare, Mike Sanders, this whole group of guys that came up from the power plant. WCW put them on TV thinking that fresh blood might help them. The only problem was they couldn't get these guys out of the tag team division, and that he couldn't get them into main angles, because basically WCW was doing what WCW did, just kept on pushing the old guys and made them the future of the company, which made no sense because there's nowhere for them to go except into the grave. Canyon beat Booker T when Jeff Jarrett came down and got involved. Mike Awesome beat Scott Steiner by disqualification for the United States Heavyweight Championship. Nothing really spectacular there. This might go down as one of the stupidest, most wasted money things in all of WCW. Vampiro fought the Demon in a graveyard match. What is a graveyard match? They went to a graveyard and they set up a huge sort of movie set. And they had a match there, which was the Demon, a.k.a. the Kiss guy, coming out and fighting against Vampiro. And they fought all up and down this graveyard. And the only way that they did this whole movie set was Charles Robinson holding a flashlight. Was the only light that they could get. They fought through darkness. They fought in a river. They did everything in the world. They finally got Vampiro hit a big old tombstone over the head of the Demon, knocking him out. Once the Demon was knocked out, he got put into a casket, dropped into an open grave, and basically because of that happened, he had to join the Black Army, which was Vampiro, the Great Muta, and the Demon. Pay attention to the next pay-per-view. He gets kicked out already. But Shane Douglas and Buff Bagwell, who of course were a tag team during the New Blood, they broke up. They had a fight. It was bad. It ended with Tori, who was siding with Buff Bagwell, kicked Buff Bagwell in the nuts, then siding with Shane Douglas. Hollywood Hogan had the whole stare down with Jeff Jarrett, where Jeff Jarrett walked into the ring, laid down in the middle of the ring. Hogan pinned him, leaving WCW and never to return. That leaving Goldberg versus Kevin Nash. Kevin Nash was fighting for the history of Scott. Pretty cool. When he walked out to the ring, he was trying to rally up the troops of the NWO fame. And as he walked out, Scott Steiner was standing near Gorilla, and he said, "Get in the game." And Scott Steiner, who was making out with a girl, said, "Hey, I'm in the game." And then Kevin Nash reminded him that this was for Scott Hall, and that he had to win this. Basically in this match, you could all see what was coming out. Scott Steiner came down to cheer on Kevin Nash. He ended up turning on Kevin Nash. Goldberg got the win. Then he ended up ripping up Scott Hall's contract for him never to return. And in the main event that Russo booked on the fly during the show, I did it for the Booker T's. I did it for the Jarretts. All the animals. Basically, Booker T came out and wrestled Jeff Jarrett for the new WCW World Heavyweight Championship. And Booker T got the win with the bookend over Jeff Jarrett. Pretty much a surprise, since Jarrett was the chosen one, and Jarrett was the WCW champion coming into the show. But Booker T was the future of WCW. Nobody saw it coming, and they were hoping that this was going to change WCW. Honestly, WCW from here on out with Booker T as a champion looked like they were less than they were before. Straight up minor league wrestling. That just basically the only people that were involved was the people who WWE didn't want anymore. Booker T ended up going there, becoming a big star, a Hall of Famer, but at this point, he did not need to be a World Heavyweight Champion. Next review is going to be the New Blood Rising 2000. There's 2 good matches. I'll tell you that much. Peace out.